Hi, everybody. I've got a hopefully brief discussion of an article I read. It was this article. I will share my screen and show you the online article. New York Times, young artists rode a $712 million boom. Then came the bust. And it's one of those articles that describes very eruditely the ups and downs of the art market and the fact that living artists are uh, sometimes woefully, sometimes nicely affected by the art auction market and the reselling of their art. Um, and the upshot is basically, here it is. First came the meteoric rise. A painting this one artist made in 2020 sold at auction just a year later for more than 100 grand, more than double its estimate. So all of a sudden there's a boom in, this artist is hot. Collectors are looking to get in on the next thing and profit from this artist's art by buying it from him and reselling it for however much more later. Um, Now, there are two things I want to talk about in this, in that, as a lot of artists know, artists don't profit directly from their art when it sells at auction. In other words, they don't get a commission when their art is resold. The collector, the person who bought the painting, offered it to the auction house, took a chance on it increasing in value, gets the bulk of the money. In other words, let's say you buy a painting for 20,000 and it resells for 100 grand. After the fees, you're making a decent chunk of change. Now, many collectors uh, will disavow the idea that they're just there to flip artwork, and there's some that will admit that they're just there to flip artwork. Um, the artist doesn't profit immediately from the sale, but as soon as the word gets out, and it's a small community relatively, so the word gets out pretty quickly that artist X is hot. The work was selling at one time. You get your paintings from this guy before they go before he starts offering them at above uh, above 50,000 when they were 20,000, for example, because you might realize that if it keeps going up and up and up, yeah, sure, something that was 20,000 sold for over 100,000. Something that was 40,000 or 50,000 could sell for, oh, maybe 300,000, until something happens and people let away. I mean, the the problem is that supply and demand. In other words, a living artist can still produce paintings, and interested collectors that are just slavering, like drooling over this person's artwork and really hoping to get in on it while it's hot, will get on a wait list. Some of them will even possibly do what they can to get further ahead in line on the wait list and get preferential treatment and so on, and even to the point of harassment in some cases. But once the interest wanes, the bubble deflates like immediately, or it goes from $107,000 back for one single painting back down to reselling it 20,000. So the artist has to recalibrate their prices accordingly for brand new paintings, especially if they have a lot of paintings out in the world. So that's one thing. Artists don't profit directly, but they do profit indirectly. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that this was one of those funny articles having to do with art and the volatility of the dollar amounts that are bandied about. And people love to judge, right? It's we're taught to do that. It's a survival technique, evaluating our environment and assessing our survival our survival possibilities. So we kind of have to constantly judge, whether we're going to keep the status quo, grow, or shrink. So so articles like this are fascinating to people, or at least to me, where I go, okay, well, this person was living in another artist they mentioned in the article specifically was living in a tiny apartment, and then some big shot collectors heard of her work and they went to visit her at her apartment, and she had to shove some dirty clothes under the bed, and she's eating top ramen kind of thing, usual thing. And then they bought some things from her, and all of a sudden she was hot, and or her paintings were in demand, and she was commanding serious prices and such. So no more top ramen. But what we as the outsider, the public, when we look at this, we go, well, that young artist, they're just young and stupid. They got cocky. They started renting a $7,000 a month luxury apartment, and uh, they should have seen it coming. They should have not assumed that their paintings were going to keep selling for more and more money. But it's kind of too easy to judge in a way. And our tendency as humans is to are citizens of the universe. The universe is expanding. Why don't we expand, right? I mean, we're constantly looking for more interesting stuff to do, interesting stuff to be, interesting ways to connect and create and ever unfolding things. And yes, just like, at the end of summer, fall comes, and the winter comes on, and everything kind of shrinks back, and the leaves fall off the trees, and the earth just kind of absorbs all the nutrients that it's going to express again in spring. We Sure, we do hunker down once in a while and take a break and stuff, but the idea is we're on this constantly upward spiral. So the again, it is very easy to judge people and say, oh, these people are young, stupid, and cocky, and they got above their raisins, so to speak, and they, rented that expensive apartment, stopped eating top ramen, treated their friends and their family to things that they need. And then the bottom fell out, and then they had to change their lifestyle again. Well, one of the guys profiled said that, yeah, he's from the hood, and he had lived in his own car, lived in cars before, and had difficult economic times prior to his sudden rise to fame. But the bouncing up and down was actually the most difficult of his life. So we like a smooth trajectory. We don't like spikes usually. It's just, you don't want to go from the rush of uh 600 grand one year and then zero money the next, because we like the 600 grand part, we don't like the zero part. But I think, for one thing, the one artist bounced, I'm sure he's bouncing back just fine, because he had some pretty stiff experiences, difficult experiences growing up. But uh but it's, again, our culture just tends to do this whole, like, it's going to get better, and then it's going to get better, and then it's going to really better, and then it's going to keep getting better. And of course, if you don't allow for, sure, you should, you know uh, assume the worst sometimes, but also assume the best. So in a way, it's kind of, my first reaction was, oh my God, what was he thinking? He got a few bucks. Next thing you know, he's in a $7,000 a month apartment. Next thing you know, his uh, couple of years go by, his paintings suddenly drop in price, and he's like moving in with his brother. Well, in a way, it's kind of like, so what? So he had some time in a really cool luxury apartment that cost him $7,000 a month. I, um, you know, in theory, maybe I would have done something differently, but I'm not 20 years old. I'm not 20 to 30 years old either anymore. Um, and luckily for me, it was hard at the time, but when I was in my, let's see, around age 20, 19, 20, 21, 22, I had a commission only job. So this is long enough ago that my first paycheck would be $50. My next paycheck would be maybe 80. Then it would go closer to 200. Then it would peak out at about 350, and then it would go down again. So I learned that, yeah, it's going to go up and up and up, and then it's going to peak out, and then it's going to go down and down again. And so yeah, what that taught me was not to spend all $350 of the so-called the what was big at the time $350 paycheck. Um, also, again, it's just, why begrudge somebody even a brief experience of something that's totally different? He might have more to say now that he's had such a contrasting set of experiences, going from the hood in a large northeastern city to a luxury apartment in Miami, even for a few months, who knows? Um, and yeah, he might not have anything to show for it. Uh, but on the other hand, he might have something to show for it in his mentality. He learned something, and maybe he'll take that to his paintings. Maybe that will inform his creative output from now on. So again, let me see here. Again, yeah, um, it's a, what is it? Well, they likened it to a pendulum swing in the article. You're hot, you're not, you're hot, somebody else is hot, somebody else is not. And it's not it's a waste of time to judge somebody on what they did when they were hot, unless they're a total jerk. And yeah, he's like, okay, don't be a total jerk when you're rich, okay? But um but back when, regardless, what's going to stand the test of time is their actual painting, not whether they had partied hard, or partied the money away or whatever. So um and again, it's also, of course, it's a cautionary tale for anybody growing, anybody younger, anybody coming up on the, making that career trajectory, want to be a pot artist and stuff, and want to not you want to one day you want to stop eating that, having nothing but top ramen to eat, right? um and it also goes, I think, dovetails into our current society's um, instability, because, basically, as a, I'll just tell you how old I am. I'm 58 years old. My parents' generation was get a job, do what you're told for life. And that works for some people. It worked kind of okay for them, my parents, kind of not okay. It doesn't work for me. So, and I do see people who convince themselves that it works. And I don't know how convincing it always is. So it definitely is a tale of the volatility of the um the way the way our society is structured. You still, in theory, can get a job, do what you're told, and do okay. However, it seems to be a little less so as time goes by. There were, I remember Pete Townsend of the rock group The Who complained he had gone to art school in England in the late 50s, early 60s, probably early 60s, and complained that, I forget what the numbers were, but 30,000 students are going to school to learn a skill that is only needed for about 300 jobs, that kind of thing. Well, now it's not so much the go to school, do what you're told, learn a skill, go to a job, do what you're told, survive. It's a matter of gathering skills, not only of what you went to school for, but observing the world around you and looking at the fact that the commercial art illustration, probably that Pete Townsend was complaining about, those jobs aren't necessarily so much offered by agencies or clearinghouses, that in the same way that freelance artists, commercial artists work on the internet today, or work in whatever capacities. Obviously any photographer is going to tell you like that their whole profession was totally upended by the iPhone's ability to take a camera to take a picture at the drop of a hat. So it's observing the world around you and accepting the volatility of it, while and in addition to developing your skills. And as there's this great book, Bohemian Paris by Dan Frank, and talks about a very, very different art world 100 years ago. And of course, Picasso is featured in there. And at some point, Picasso was saying, now this is after he acquired patronage, became very wealthy, and was basically the toast of the town, and made it through World War II. And he basically said, and I'm not sure how facetious he was being at the time, but he was saying something along the lines of, I don't have the exact quote in the book, but basically he was saying, I wish I still have the money I have now, but I wish I had the lifestyle that I had when I was poor. And by the time he was wealthy, he had a wife that wanted X number of luxuries. He had to keep up appearances. He had to have a studio separate from his house. He had servants to pay. He had society appointments to keep, and certain clothing that he was expected to wear at certain times, and so on. And of course, so he's referring to the freedom that he had when he was young, starving, or not eating too regularly, but minimally, wore probably the same pair of pants day in and day out. And if he didn't feel like having entertaining a collector, or even having a collector come over and look at his work, he wouldn't let him over. He wouldn't let him into his studio. So he, of course, didn't go back to the lifestyle that he had when he was poor, although he did say that. So there was kind of a, what shall we say, what the wanting it both ways, wanting the social freedom, but actually having, not having to eat tiny amounts of not very good food while creating. So it is a choice. People have to make decisions in real time, and when things are happening that fast, you got to give them credit for surviving the experience, regardless of whether they blow all their money on a $7,000 apartment. So again, I won't, by no means would I judge anybody's behavior on that level because I haven't experienced that. First of all, I don't have any experience of suddenly being a rising star and having huge demand for my artwork and, suddenly being, wealthy. But, but I have been in the trenches long enough to know that what people are going to care about in the future is the actual work you do. So I guess I'll go back to work and get off my little talk thingy and see about making some more artwork. Thanks. I'll see you next time. Bye.